Welcome to Tipping Spears with Hannah Becker. Today's conversation promises to be an insightful one with a remarkable guest. Whether you're joining us for the first time or you're a regular listener, we're so glad you're here. Our goal is to bring you closer to the innovative leaders and thinkers shaping our future. And today, we're thrilled to welcome Nate Boaz. Nate is the co-founder and CEO of Prometheus Intelligence, a voice AI startup that turns any professional into an expert investigative interviewer in any language, anywhere. In under a year, Nate led the creation of Prometheus's flagship project, Torch, which was deemed awardable by the U.S. Department of War and proven in field tests with the U.S. Army and Naval Postgraduate School. Before founding Prometheus, Nate built a distinguished career building global teams at Microsoft, Work Capital, Accenture, McKinsey and Company. A former Marine Corps counterintelligence and human intelligence officer, Nate served in combat during Operations Enduring Freedom and Iraqi Freedom. He holds an MBA with distinction from Harvard Business School and a Bachelor's of Science from the U.S. Naval Academy. He is also the author of Running Towards Fire, Following the Warrior Path. Yet Nate is most proud of his service on the board of veteran nonprofit Patrol Base Abate, focused on proactively preventing veteran suicide, and of being a devoted husband and father to 3 incredible children. He and his family live in Atlanta, Georgia. Welcome to Tipping Spears, Nate.
Thank you so much, Hannah. I'm so happy to be here and thank you for the opportunity.
So can you start us off today by telling us where your story begins?
Oh my goodness. Well, let's see. I grew up in the college town of Gainesville, Florida, where the University of Florida is, in a rather blue collar family. My mom was a nurse at the hospital there at the university for over 30 years, and my stepdad, who was basically my dad, drove a truck for UPS for most of his career and did some building construction after that. And went to all public schools. So I'm a product of North Florida's finest public schools, and kind of escaped to the Naval Academy when I was 18. That was the first time I was really, outside my comfort zone of being there in North Florida.
So what interested you in, serving in the military and kind of, I guess, what got you into the Naval Academy? How did that come about?
Yeah, so I had 2 grandfathers who both served in World War II and both had distinguished careers in the Army Air Corps and then the Air Force once it became the Air Force. And so while it was tough to get stories out of them, that generation tended to do amazing things and then not talk about it. I very quickly found out, and luckily before both of them passed away, their experiences, what they had done in World War II, and I really looked up to their military service. And one of my grandfathers actually took me on college tours when I was in high school, and we went up to West Point, New York. We went up to Annapolis, and a few other schools. He was very disappointed that I didn't want to go out to Colorado Springs and see the Air Force Academy, because I was pretty convinced already at a young age that I wanted to do something that was, if not in the infantry, pretty close to
Mhm.
it, whether that was being a soldier in the Army or a Marine or however that was going to come about. So.
So was there a particular event or person that kind of served as a catalyst for your career along the way?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of moments. One was when I was 12. I know that's rather young, but my grandfather, my namesake grandfather, William Boaz, he was getting pretty close to the end for him. He had some heart problems, and I'll never forget. It was around the time of the first Gulf War, and he was talking to me about that and, like, doing something important with your life. And he said, son, I don't care what you do with your life as long as you serve something bigger or greater than yourself, right? As long as you do something serving something greater than yourself. And to me, that the only place I felt like I knew that you did that was through military service, right? Of
Mhm.
course, there's lots of ways you can do that, but like that was the model that was set for me. And then one other one was, I'll never forget, at the Naval Academy, Captain Wesley Fite best last name for a, a Marine officer, Captain Fight, right? Like Captain America. He was like the, company officer responsible for the Marine training program. And embarrassingly, I had a lot of trouble climbing the rope on the obstacle
Mhm.
course for the Marine Corps. And you had to complete all these things, to a certain standard to go from being just at the Naval Academy to being a Marine, officer. And so I'll never forget, I did well on all the other stuff, and I was ready to go, but I couldn't get up that stinking rope. And let's just say he motivated me to get to the top of the rope and to be able to do that consistently going forward. And but it's a funny story, but the bigger thing in it for me is having people that see something in you that is
Mhm.
greater than what you see in yourself and seeing
Mhm.
potential, right? Like I think he said to me, you have a Marine inside of you. You just have to like,
Oh,
let him out,
yeah.
And um, so yeah, I'm grateful for the helpers along the way that have helped me in my career.
So I know every journey, has its hurdles. Can you
Yeah.
tell us kind of what some of the biggest obstacles were that you faced in your career and how you overcame them?
Yeah, well, the first one I'll start with, and then I'll fast forward in the career is, you know, um, I learned really quickly in college that when you don't work hard, you don't do well.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it,
And
Nate.
I know that's a pretty like, yeah, duh, but I feel like, in the current generation, it's not just a generational thing, but in the current work environment, I think there's sort of, expectations of being given things and sort of an
Yeah.
entitlement mentality. And I learned the hard way that, things are earned, not given. You
Hmm.
earn your place at the Naval Academy. You earn the title of Marine. You earn, your MOS. You
Hmm.
earn, the right to lead others in difficult situations. And so I think I faced that hurdle because like my freshman year, my plebe year, and then also my senior year, I almost got kicked out, right? And so
Oh,
like people see what you put on your resume and your LinkedIn page, and then and then there's the real stories. And the real stories for me is like I almost got kicked out twice, and that was a wake up call for me because like I
hmm.
didn't want to go back home and go to the University of Florida or go somewhere.
Yeah.
Like I wanted to be a Marine, and so it was it was a tough wake up call. I think the other one that I would highlight that's probably more relevant to folks transitioning today from the military,
Hmm.
and maybe just in general is when you go from doing something so meaningful, so purposeful in your life, and then kind of
Hmm.
get out of that bubble and come into the commercial sort of, you go from the life of significance to the life of success and,
Hmm.
material things, and that can be disheartening, very, very
Hmm.
disheartening. And I tried to stay tough and have this, hard outer shell, and didn't admit that I needed therapy or help processing it, or friends and mentors to bring me along. And so I tried to do a lot after I got out on my own.
Hmm.
And that doesn't necessarily end well for a lot of people, right? And so I struggled with a lot of things that people struggle with, but maybe don't talk about. I struggled with
Hmm.
alcohol. I've been sober now for almost 3 years. It'll be 3 years in January. I struggled with relationships. Have been divorced a couple of times, right? Like, and again, these are things that happen and are real
Hmm.
that people don't put on their resume or talk about, right?
Hmm.
And I think it's important to know that just because someone may look like they're successful from the outside or doing well doesn't necessarily mean that they are in all aspects of their life. They
Hmm.
might be doing well in terms of climbing the career ladder, but
Hmm.
holistically, in terms of family and spiritually,
Hmm.
and in all aspects of their life. And so yeah, I've had some struggles and some hurdles in those regards, but I think I've learned a lot. And my great hope is that by sharing what I learned, people can not only, get through the same, dark spots, but maybe avoid them altogether.
Mhm.
Maybe they can learn from the path that I've been on so that they don't have to go the same way.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really encouraging insight, Nate. I think folks tend to think, success is, the resume. And then if you follow that and that's all you focus on, or that's the only capabilities being built there,
Right.
it really can catch up. And
Yeah.
I love how you have kind of a holistic approach
Yeah.
to life and recognizing all the other areas um, that folks need to kind of also prioritize and strengthen.
Yeah.
So in 2003, you were part of a team that rescued 7 U.S. Army POWs in Iraq. Can you tell us about that experience and kind of what sticks with you now? I guess now it's over 20 years ago.
Yeah. So, I mean, as you can probably imagine, just with that setup, that it was, probably the one of the most monumental moments in my entire life. Definitely in my professional life. I mean,
Mhm.
the birth of my children and my marriage to my wife, like those are pretty monumental. This professionally was probably the, mo most monumental thing, because it sort of encapsulates this question, this notion I wrestled with when I wrote my book. But
Mhm.
I thought about it from that moment on, which is like, what compels a person, not just a soldier or Marine or, sailor or airman, but what compels a person when in the face of life-threatening danger to move
Mhm.
toward it
Mhm.
versus to freeze or run the other way, right? And I don't mean just fight, it's not just the fear response of,
Mhm.
fight back, but it's like actually, put themselves in a position of sacrifice and potential harm to
Mhm.
themselves. And I think that only happens when you have something that you love more than you love yourself.
Mhm.
And in that moment and in that, the opening gambit of the Iraq war, my team and I were very much focused on bringing home our soldiers and fellow military members alive. And that wasn't our only mission. We were collecting
Mhm.
intelligence to help the infantry battalions we were with, locate and close
Mhm.
with and destroy the enemy and accomplish that mission. But we knew that these Army soldiers from the 507th and these 2 Army pilots that were Apache pilots had been captured. Um, many of the maintenance soldiers were captured at the same time Jessica Lynch was
Mhm.
captured. She was taken to a hospital. But these 7, and it's a hardly told story. I don't think it's ever
Yeah.
been really told in its full way until I wrote my book. Is they were tortured, paraded through the towns, put
Mhm.
on TV, shown on Al Jazeera and Iraqi TV, treated horribly for 20 plus days, lost 20 to 30 pounds, were moved like 8 or 9 times from, prison location to prison
Mhm.
location, and almost were killed by friendly fire in Baghdad because we were
Mhm.
bombing and taking
Yeah.
Baghdad uh, early April, April 9th and 10th, and they were moved out. And we thought we had lost them. We just missed them in
Mhm.
Baghdad when the Marines and then eventually the Army took Baghdad. And and so you think it's this like lost cause, and they thought, right, having talked to them and
Yeah.
debriefed them and stayed in touch with many of them since, they thought that was their sort of last supper, their last,
Wow.
moment when they were in Samara. They got fed, hamburgers for the first time, and they were, being treated nicer by these guards. And they're like, oh,
Mhm.
this is it. They're gonna execute us because their guards were very scared that once we caught them, that we were going to kill them, right? And so
Mm.
like no one wanted it was
Mhm.
you know, proverbial hot potato. Nobody wanted to be
Mhm.
caught when the music stopped with the
Mhm.
POWs. And my team, had this relentless focus on finding them and collecting the information to find them. And one of my guys, who's the co-founder with me now on the company
Okay.
that I have, Randy Meyer, he got not only the critical intelligence, but got one of the family members of one of the guards to take my GPS device and go all the way to where they were and get an exact grid coordinate and bring it back to us. Now, this is 2003, right?
Yeah.
And so the technology at the time was not like you're just cell phone tracking or anything like
Mhm.
that, right? Like, this was a very simple, GPS device. We were using maps. We had them draw a map. We looked at we had these satellite images that were on paper that we would roll out, and we'd look at the grid squares and the grid coordinates and try to find exactly where they were. And they were, just a couple of miles away from where we were at the time
Wow.
in a village in Samara, in a civilian apartment condo type
Mhm.
building, being guarded, and we negotiated their release without any shots fired. Now, a Marine team from 3rd Light Armored Reconnaissance
Mhm.
Battalion, with a couple of my guys, went in, kicked down the door, got them out, separated them from the guards. But I think one of the amazing things is we made a deal and we kept that deal with the guards that if they didn't resist, there were no
Mhm.
shots fired, and that those particular guards hadn't tortured or harmed the
Mhm.
POWs, that we would let them go. And we
Wow.
did. We did. They weren't high value,
Mhm.
targets or anything like that. And so then we spent the next few hours, debriefing the
Mhm.
POWs. We were the ones to tell them that Jessica Lynch was still alive and that she had been rescued. Um, we got them out of the prison clothes that they'd been in
Mhm.
for a few weeks and into, clean clothes. We got them water, cigarettes. I don't know why people who don't smoke want to smoke a cigarette when there's some sense of relief, but um, whatever they wanted, fresh
Mhm.
food, water, kindness, and
Mhm.
just, welcoming our soldiers home. And then they were flown out of there back to Kuwait, back to
Mhm.
Germany, and then eventually the United States. And like I said, it's not a story that ever got, told
Mhm.
the right way because no one really knew it except for us.
Mhm.
The POWs didn't even know that we had been looking for them for weeks, and
Mhm.
really trying to find them. Had just missed them in Baghdad, and then ended up
Mhm.
being the unit to find them and bring them home.
Wow. That's quite the experience, Nate. Appreciate you sharing that. I remember reading about it back in the day, but there wasn't much on it. And so I
No.
was so excited to talk to you because I was like, wow, this is
Well,
what
and
a moment.
just recently, somebody put it in perspective for me because you hear
Mhm.
about, hostage recoveries, and you hear
Yeah.
about, things, and everyone sort of, knew the Jessica Lynch story for
Right.
probably all the wrong reasons, because it
Hmm.
was blown out of proportion. But this rescue of these 7 American POWs, was historic in many ways. It was the largest successful POW rescue since World War II.
Hmm.
Now think about that. I mean, that included Vietnam and Korea and Afghanistan and all the rest of Iraq and everything else that happened anywhere in between. If you talk, Grenada and Haiti and,
Hmm.
Somalia, and you think about movies like Black Hawk Down that came out, which was about a couple of people that were,
Hmm.
held and rescued. But this was 7 POWs rescued successfully,
Hmm.
no shots fired, largest since World War II. And then Shoshana Johnson was the first African American woman POW
Hmm.
ever. Um, and so it was an interesting, situation, and one that, I hope the story, gets out to more people because I think it should give a lot of hope that
Yeah.
we have this ethos, this warrior ethos across the branches of service. It's not just a Marine thing or an Army thing or a Ranger
Hmm.
thing or a SEAL thing, but we have this ethos of no one left behind, right?
Hmm.
And we will do anything possible, to bring our folks home.
Hmm. Yeah, I grew up one of my grandmother's friends lived down the road from us, and her husband ended up MIA in Vietnam. And I remember kind of this time in the Iraq War, and she was so transfixed to the news of American POWs,
Yeah.
Jessica Lynch. This was just And I remember, like her husband was never found. She
Mhm.
died, never remarrying, just like she just waited. And
Yeah.
it brought her so much hope with these rescues. And I just remember that being like, I guess I was young, I hadn't really thought about it, but for her and her like lived experience and kind of the history, um, especially with Vietnam. And they're just, I didn't realize how many weren't recovered, how many
Yeah.
didn't come home. And so to have, you start seeing POWs in Iraq, and like that was on her mind of like, oh gosh, is this going to be like Vietnam
Yeah.
too? And it wasn't, thanks to folks like you. So it was really neat to,
Yeah, and it is, and I mean, there's efforts to this day, as you know, to still
yeah,
bring remains
still,
home
yep.
from Vietnam and from other places around the world, and um, you know that ethos was really drilled into me at the Naval Academy and in the Marines. Like we memorized the code of conduct, right? And
Hmm.
I met John McCain, and
Hmm.
um, I met Admiral Stockdale, and I met
Hmm.
these people who, endured, the Hanoi Hilton
Yeah.
and years of torture and being POWs. And um, it instills this mentality of never again, but
Hmm.
no one gets left behind, right?
Yeah.
We don't let, dead or alive, we
Hmm.
don't let someone keep our people.
Hmm.
We bring them home.
Hmm. So I know you wrote a book, Running Towards Fire. Can
Yeah.
you tell us kind of, how that came about and kind of what drove you to write the book? What does it focus on? And what kind of, the message that
Yeah.
you communicate?
Yeah. So yeah, here's the book. I have a copy here. You know, um, I refer back to it because for me, it was 20 years in the making, and you know, first off, I will say anyone who has the desire to write a book or feels like they have a book in their head that they want to write, keep going. Don't stop. Don't let anyone tell you you can't do it. If no one's going to publish it, self-publish it on Amazon. Like and it may sound a little bit selfish, but I wrote it for me
Mhm.
at first, right? Which was like it is one of the most effective and least expensive forms of therapy. You know, some people do art, some people do
Yeah.
music, some people do yoga, some people like to hike in the woods. Like
Hmm.
for me, it was writing. It was very cathartic to put my thoughts and feelings and emotions. And I didn't get in touch with my feelings and emotions until I actually sat down and processed what had happened. And it was somewhat born out of therapy.
Hmm.
When I finally admitted I needed it and was going to therapy, um, there's this version of therapy called exposure therapy, where you're supposed
Hmm.
to experience the things that you're afraid of, or the things that are reminding you of the trauma and you haven't processed. And so one of the things I had to do is write down the sort of most disturbing experiences. One of those was when we took Baghdad, and we were,
Hmm.
really tails hanging in the wind. We were in unarmored Humvee, one of four. One of those four actually was completely, destroyed. Not ours, but our vehicle was riddled with bullets. I was knocked down by an RPG. It's just a
Hmm.
very, very harrowing experience. One of the bloodiest battles of the Iraq War to take Baghdad, and um, I never really processed that. And so I had to write it down.
Hmm.
And then at the end of writing it down, I had to do this subjective units of distress score, which was like, how am I feeling? Do I feel like I'm back in that moment?
Yeah.
Do I feel like I'm reliving that moment? Or, can I put it in its proper place in the past? And can I see it
Hmm.
as being something that happened to me, but it's not still happening to me? And so as I started to do this, I was like, this is very helpful. And there's probably a lot more here for me to process than just, a couple of, events. Um, and then out of all of this, I had this real notion about that question about who runs toward fire and why.
Hmm.
But I also had this question about, you know, is it weird that I thought some of the most beautiful and amazing things that I ever experienced were in some of the darkest places I'd ever been? And I felt weird about that. I felt like that
Mhm,
was the thing I couldn't really communicate to people,
mhm,
and I needed to get it out. And so I got it out to my therapist finally, but then I got it down on paper and I started writing about how I felt and how I feel like there's this big disconnect between sort of the world of significance and the world of success and
mhm,
the world of selfless service and the world of commercial selfishness. And I felt like a lot of other veterans and maybe people who had done things of service in their life might be feeling disconnected too,
mhm.
you know? And so then it became about that, right? I had written it for me at first, and then I started writing it for maybe by me being vulnerable and sharing my story and what I experienced and what the warrior path has been for me,
Mhm.
maybe others, will benefit from that. And I kind of came up with this one notion, that if one person, maybe one person other than my mom, right? But if one person other than my mom reads the book and it helps them, then I've done my job, right? Like,
Yeah.
um, because that was the goal. It had helped me, but I wanted to help others and
Mhm,
hopefully it helps others too.
mhm. Yeah, there's something so kind of like beautiful and encouraging when we take something that's very painful or that like has a lot of pain and loss, and then trying to transform that into something that does, impact others in a way that makes their life better.
Yeah.
So in your book, you stated, I kind of wrote down this quote because it really stood out to me. You said, I felt like I didn't belong in the society I fought to protect. When I read that, it really
Yeah.
resonated with me because
Did I say that? Yeah.
you did,
I
yeah,
have felt that at my core, in my bones, in my
it's
soul. Yeah, I have felt that.
it's a very powerful statement, Nate. Can you kind of expound, I guess, on that part of your experience, or like, kind of how that plays into to your experience then, and then kind of how I guess society now.
Yeah. If you're okay with it, grabbed a part of a page in the book that I think speaks very much to my feelings
Yeah,
and probably does a more coherent and clear job
yeah.
of interpreting that. And if you take what you said, right, which I think is a powerful sort of synopsis or synthesis of the feelings, and then what I was saying about how like I found this sort of unbelievable amount of humanity and
Mhm,
sacrifice in a very dark place. And what I meant by that is like seeing these Marines,
mhm,
sacrifice for each other. And yes, many of them knew each other and were brothers in
mhm,
arms or whatnot, but many of them didn't know me or know others that were out there
mhm,
fighting. And the fact that they would, put themselves directly in harm's way, right? There was something just, you know, majestic about that, but it was
mhm,
hard to talk about that because if you say that to others, are they going to think I'm like, you know, bloodthirsty or weird because
yeah.
but it's not about that. It's about, it's about the love of one another. And sort of when I came back and was in my, darkest place, I kind of went on a rant about this because I think there's a lot of people who say, are our military folks broken? Do
Mhm,
they have moral injury? Did someone make them do something that they didn't, want to do and now they feel bad about it? And quite frankly, I was like, that's bullshit. Maybe it is true for a small section of
mhm,
people. But for most of the guys and gals I knew, um, it was this. I wasn't broken. I wasn't morally injured. I wasn't the Hollywood cliche of the soldier turned protesting pacifist. That was why I felt so disconnected after leaving the service. I didn't feel like I belong in the society I fought to protect, which is the quote you picked. Where was the astonishing humanity and sacrifice in this selfish and superficial world? Where were the people who would understand and appreciate what I had seen? I was not ashamed of what I had done. I was not seeking forgiveness for killing those who would have killed me and my Marines if they had the chance. We did our job. If I was ashamed of anything, it was that I missed it so damn much and did nothing about it. I missed the calling of a purpose greater than myself. I missed the brotherhood that can only be forged through the crucible of shared suffering. I missed facing obstacles head on, the hard work and pushing myself past my limiting beliefs and what I could endure mentally, physically, and spiritually in service to a mission and a team. I missed working outdoors, even if it meant harsh conditions and physical discomfort. The steeper the climb, the more spectacular the view from the summit. I even missed the strong and unforgettable smells of diesel fuel and burnt black powder. There was something deeply primal about what I had experienced, and I didn't feel it anymore. And I wanted to feel it again so badly. What had I become? Was I now one of those miserable creatures who had nothing I would fight for? Nothing I cared more about than my own personal safety and comfort? I had become a slave to the almighty dollar and the time clock. I had become the physical embodiment of what I hated. I was a hollow man living amongst hollow men. I was trapped in a no man's land, neither dead nor fully alive. So it's interesting. You picked that quote separately from me picking that page, and that quote was in that page, but it's kind of a release to say all those things to you, but like, you know, that's why I was so angry when I came back.
Good.
And I was angry for like 20 years about like, still a little bit angry, but about the society that we live in versus the people
Mhm.
who are willing to
Mhm.
sacrifice themselves and all that they have and all that they believe in
Mhm.
for the rest of us.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, that's
It's a great
and
passage.
I've actually had people dog ear that page and take a photo of that page and send me that and be like, yeah, me too. This is how I feel, right? Um, so hopefully by us getting this out there, more people will feel that because I think it's a disservice to their sacrifice and service when we look at our veterans and we say, are they broken? Are they
Mhm.
wounded? Are they, yeah, there's real physical and mental
Mhm.
wounds, but for the most part, they're some of the most amazing humans that I've ever had the opportunity to be around.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great passage, Nate. It's so kind of but descriptive and cathartic.
Yes. Send me your bill after this and I'll pay you whatever I pay my therapist. I'll double it.
That's funny. Uh, so after the Marines,
Yeah.
you went to Harvard Business School. And then you worked for several big corporations,
Yeah.
right? So McKinsey, Accenture, Microsoft. What can you tell us kind of what transitioning from the military service was like for you? And then advice for veterans who are kind of struggling to figure out post-military careers. Like when I found out kind of your transition
Yeah.
story, I mean, that's like Nate, like, A plus on like where you landed after service. There's not a lot of folks I know that made that leap. And so I was so interested to kind of hear. I guess I know that's kind of that's like that's the version, the Hollywood version of like then there's all what's
Yeah.
going on behind the scenes.
Well, first I was very fortunate to have some good friends and mentors and supporters, along the way. I did not have a clue whatsoever that business school was actually a thing or that Harvard
Yeah.
had one and that I should go. And so if you step back and say, well, where were you at in the decision process? I was going to stay in and be a foreign area officer and
Mhm.
and go to Naval Postgraduate School in DLI. I got selected for Cambodia and Khmer, which is only spoken basically in Cambodia and in little parts of Laos and Vietnam. I wanted Arabic or
Yeah.
Chinese or Russian, and I didn't get it because I was like a first lieutenant or captain at the time. So the Marine Corps did their best job of helping me leave, in that regard. Um, so I want to be a foreign area officer. I applied to the CIA and the FBI,
Mhm.
and the FBI wanted me to come down to the southern border of California. I was living in San Diego, come down to the southern border and do interrogations at the
Mhm.
southern border. And I was like, that doesn't sound like what I wanted to do. I wanted to go be like an agent taking down terrorist,
Mhm.
networks. Um, and I didn't hear back from the CIA very, very quickly. They take a long, long time. And my best friend, who's still my best friend to this day, we were in each other's weddings. We talk frequently. He had gone to Cornell undergrad, was also a Marine CI human guy, got out earlier because he didn't have the 5 year commitment.
Mhm.
And he got into a bunch of business schools. And he's like, why don't you come to business school and we'll overlap for a year and it'll be amazing. It'll be so much fun. And I'm like, what's business school?
Wow.
How does one get in? And but once I set my sights on it, I like started ferociously preparing for the
Mhm.
GMAT, writing essays
Mhm.
to explain why my grades were so poor in college, and you know, um, but then getting recommendations from some senior military officers who had mentored me and had
Mhm.
helped me along the way, and and then I get the call that I got in. I'm like, this is unbelievable. I can't give this up. And this was before the post 9/11 GI Bill, so I had to fund it all
Wow.
myself. And there I was, like looking at my assets and my paltry military salary, and then the bill for going to Harvard Business School. I was like, I guess I'm going to be taking out loans for the rest of my life. It was like the most, like I had a condo in San Diego. I sold it and that paid for, a half of business school, which was good, fortunately. But it was still, an uphill climb. And I got there and I had all the imposter and
Mhm.
syndrome that a lot of people have. I was like, I don't belong here.
Mhm.
There's people here whose, daddy and granddaddy and great granddaddy had all gone there and their names were on a building, kind of thing. And but the harder I worked and showed up, and the professors are phenomenal, right? Like that, that's the value of the whole thing. People say the value is the brand. People say the values, who you meet while you're there or whatever.
Mhm.
To me, the value was actually in the academic courses and professors if you took it seriously.
Mhm.
So a lot of people that get in and skate through places like
Mhm.
that, and but that imposter syndrome by working hard quickly turned into I totally belong here, right? So I went
Mhm.
from I don't belong here. Who are these people? I don't fit in.
Yeah.
To I totally belong here. To maybe some of these other people don't belong here. You know, because I'm working hard and I'm getting good grades, and some of these other
There you
people I
go.
think are just here because their grandfather's name is on a building,
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, and they say they don't do that, but they do that,
They do.
and McKinsey, I will say, like I didn't know the world. People have access to so much more information now.
Yeah.
I didn't know what, management consulting was. And it's still
Oh.
not a real job. I can
Yeah.
attest to it as someone who's been a partner in a couple different management consulting firms. So I didn't know what management consulting was, investment banking,
Mhm.
private equity, venture capital, all these things. I just thought there were doctors and lawyers and people who
Mhm.
ran businesses, right? And then
Yeah.
government people, right? Like, and then a lot of blue collar jobs because that's
Yeah.
where my family came from is, you work really hard and you show up every day and you save money and you earn a good living and
Mhm.
you take care of your family and you put food on the table. And so this whole world of like, these jobs where like that's really a job, hedge funds, right? That's really a
Yeah.
job. Like what good are you actually doing in the world? Can you explain that to me in a few sentences, and not like use, words that nobody understands? And so I got there. And the veteran community was super strong at Harvard.
Mm.
There's a really strong veteran community. There's actually a long history of Harvard and the business school supporting the military during, times of need, times of war. And so they've got a good relationship and a good community. that veteran community, we helped each other find jobs, get connected. And then I found a lot of veterans at McKinsey. And I think, I just posted something about it the other day. Bob Sternfels, who's the managing director of all of McKinsey, and I know him well. I think he's the grandson or the son of a veteran.
Mhm.
And there are firms that say they do a really good
Mhm.
job of, taking care of veterans and they promote things, but a lot of that's performative. It's
Mhm.
very, yeah, we posted something on LinkedIn and, Facebook, or, we provided a small discount or whatever. The number one thing these organizations can do is hire veterans, and not only
Mhm.
hire them, but appreciate them for the skills that they bring, not try to force them into these skills that they think, they want them to have. And I think of all the organizations that I've worked for, and I have no problem, putting this out there because none of them are, paying me still, right? Is that McKinsey, out of all the other ones I worked for, really, really is dedicated to hiring veterans
Mhm.
and harnessing their strengths and helping them be successful using those strengths in the context of their organization. And so, and I think they're doing a lot with the Skill Bridge program now.
Mhm.
And so and they're unique. A lot of these organizations are like, I want you to have, an MBA, or I want you to
Mhm.
have, and only have gone to these 10 schools or whatever, and I remember one of the partners I worked with when I was a summer intern and then, early on at McKinsey was former CIA. And, and it just showed me that they look for a variety of backgrounds from a variety of places, with the strength being someone that's, wicked smart, but more street smart, right? Problem solving
Mhm.
smart than book smart, and really good with people, people
Mhm.
leadership skills. And so I think it's really important to find a culture of an organization that doesn't just put it on the walls, there's
Mhm.
something on the walls that say, here's our values and our mission, but lives it in terms of appreciating veteran service and the unique capabilities that they bring, and
Mhm.
helps them, accentuate those strengths and magnify
Mhm.
those strengths versus, round off, those edges.
Do you have any advice, Nate, for, vets who are transitioning into the civilian, workplace? Like, are there any things that, surprised you or any kind of lessons learned or insights kind of making that switch from uniform to working with all the civilians?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I look back and without regrets, but say, what would I do differently? Or,
Mhm.
what did I learn around the way? And I said, this, and I'll reinforce it, just a second ago, I said this, but it's critical to find organizations that has a culture that you feel like matches your values. That's one. And and it goes beyond, like I said, just like what's stated on the website or on the walls, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
You can really tell that by asking tough questions in the interview process of the people interviewing you,
Mhm.
right? Like, and don't just settle for easy answers of, well, it's all about the people. I like the people here. Well, tell me how the people here actually, you know, lead by example, how they execute against the mission, how they embody the values.
Mhm.
Give me examples of instances where people, violated the values of this place, and how did you guys
Hmm.
respond, right?
Well, that's a good question.
Um,
Yeah.
and so I think that's critical. I think another thing is you know, I probably hid my strengths too long, and
Hmm.
what I mean by that is, like, I just tried to play the game of whatever
Mhm.
organization I was in, and said, okay, this is what you have to do to be successful here.
Mhm.
And so I'm just going to do whatever it takes to be
Yeah.
successful here, as opposed to saying, here's what I'm really good at that might be additive to this
Mhm.
organization. Um, and fortunately, that was at McKinsey, and then they helped me, and then that was also at Accenture, and they helped me,
Mhm.
be a better version of who I already was versus
Mhm.
being somebody different. Um, and what I mean by that in a way that I think can help transitioning veterans is do an inventory of yourself. Sit down and say, what am I really good at? Like uniquely
Mhm.
good at. And I don't mean like stuff in the military terminology, right?
Mhm.
But like what does that translate into?
Mhm.
My organizational leadership skills, my team leadership skills, my, unique capabilities. What do people seek me out for uniquely versus others, right?
Mhm.
So what are my core strengths? Then of that, what do I love to do? Because sometimes people don't love to do what they're necessarily good at. There's things on
Really?
that, it's like,
Yeah,
and people would love to do things that they may not be good at,
that's
right? And so
true.
you end up in those weird intersections, right? I I like to say when people are doing silent suffering, right, but still getting, paid for their job, it's they're doing something they're good at they don't love to do.
Good
And
way to
when
look at
people
it.
are doing something they love to do that they're not good at, they're delusional, right? And they probably need to get some training or
Yeah.
change what they're doing.
Mhm.
So what you're good at that you love to do that you can get paid to do,
Mhm.
and I use that as a coaching framework for a lot of people throughout the years, but I used it on myself a lot,
Mhm.
which is like whenever I've been dissatisfied in a role in an organization or
Mhm.
in an organization overall, it's been because I'm in some intersection where I'm either
Mhm.
in over my head because I'm
Mhm.
I'm trying to do something that I'm not good at, right? Or I'm silent suffering. I'm doing something I
Mhm.
might be good at that I can get paid to do, but I'm not loving it. And
Mhm.
so the sweet spot is really, what you're good at that you love to do that the organization's going to, write you a paycheck for.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a great way to look at it. I've never heard it described quite that way, Nate. That's you gave me
Well,
a
it's
lot
an
to
old
think
it's an
about.
old Japanese framework called Ikigai, and there's like a
Okay.
fourth, it's a Venn diagram, and there's like a fourth one, which is like what serves the world. But I try
Yeah.
not to get too fancy with it. I'm just like, hey, look, think about yourself. What are you uniquely, positioned to
Yeah.
contribute? Think about your passions. Where do those two intersect? And then go find an organization that's offering something that allows you to bring those two things together
Mm,
and put food on the table.
yeah. That's really interesting. So I know now you are your own boss as an
Well, I don't know. I should bring
entrepreneur.
my wife down here and we should ask her that. And my kids also think they're my boss.
There
So
you go. You now work for a board. No,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So I'd love to hear more about your journey as an entrepreneur. So I know you founded several businesses. You're currently serving CEO of Prometheus Intelligence.
Yeah.
Can you tell us, about the company, what it does, and kind of how that came about?
Yeah. So yes, I've been on this founder journey for a little bit over a year, started one other company. But Prometheus, we started in January. So we'll hit our 1 year anniversary, January 13th of this next year. And it's been an exciting and nerve-wracking and
Mhm.
hard,
Mhm.
besides maybe being a parent, one of the hardest things I've ever, embarked on. And so, my encouragement to other people who want to start a company is maybe do it when you're young and and less dependent, on, well, less dependent upon, right, to
Yeah.
provide for others. But I will say we are building, you said this in the intro, we're building an AI voice software that
Mhm.
turns any professional, whether it's a soldier or
Mhm.
an intelligence professional or a police officer, a first responder, someone doing internal background investigations, it turns them into an expert interviewer, able to detect deception, able to speak multiple languages, and able to write reports instantly using artificial intelligence. And
Wow.
the genesis of this, kind of goes back to that Marine Corps intelligence experience. Is that
Mhm.
my co-founder and I, he was a staff sergeant, I was a first lieutenant. We were on this team together in Kuwait and Iraq, and my first day, my first day in combat in Iraq, I had 130 plus enemy prisoners of war. I was responsible for triaging and figuring out who to interrogate and interrogating them. And the limiting factor many times in, you know, interviews for defense and intelligence and law enforcement is the number of expert interviewers you have and the number of translators you have, right? And so then it becomes really hard to scale that. You miss out on a lot of critical information to make decisions because you're only able to get to so many people so quickly. You think about, law enforcement responding to an incident and having to canvass a neighborhood or having hundreds of witnesses to something, right? We were talking to NCIS, Naval Criminal Investigative Services, the other day, and they were like, when we have a mass event, we have a terrorist attack, we have a casualty event, we have hundreds of people we need to process. We only have so many agents. Somebody out there knows something that's critical, and if we could interview more people in a high value way, right, where we know that it's asking good questions and we're getting good information, we can make so much better decisions, right? And so that's what we're trying to do. We have, as you said, we've been deemed awardable. Our product has been tested in the field with the Army Operations Testing Command. We've been deemed awardable by the Department of War. And so now we're really in the phase of serving some customers, working on the contracts to serve some customers like the Army, like the Air Force, like the Navy, hopefully the Marines one day, but serve them in a way where they can collect better information that they can rely on, more accurate information, faster, get more throughput, and make better decisions. And we think we're starting with defense and intelligence. We think we can expand out from there to law enforcement and other commercial applications.
Yeah, it's a fascinating technology, Nate. When you had first told me about it, it's one of those things I'd never really thought about. But as you were describing it, like the setup, it was like, oh wow, this fills a huge need.
Yeah.
And it's honestly, it's a need. I guess it's been there for a long time, but we just didn't realize, the capabilities, which you've harnessed those capabilities, so you can literally put it in people's hands.
Yeah, well,
Um,
the technology has finally gotten to a place where you can
yeah,
do this, right?
yeah,
But it's really important how you do it because you want it to be
right.
ethical and
Mhm.
responsible AI. You want it to be,
Mhm.
part of what we're trying to do is take the human bias out of the process. And so we're trying to be very careful not to
Yeah.
inject human bias into the process, right? And so that's part of the challenge, but also the fun of it, right? It's
Mhm.
solving a very complex but critical problem.
Mhm. So, what's been one thing that surprised you about entrepreneurship? Can you tell us kind of like how that differs from corporate employment or just whatever it was that shocked you when you became an entrepreneur?
Yeah, just absolutely how hard it is. I mean, it is, like I said, it's one of the hardest things I've ever done. And, it's like you can't experience exhilarating joy unless you
Mhm.
experience, the deep depths of depression and sadness. And,
Mhm.
I think entrepreneurship has both. I
Mhm.
don't know if this quote is true, but it sounds like something he would say. But somebody, said to me that when Elon Musk was asked what he thought about entrepreneurship, he was like, "It's like staring into an abyss while you eat glass."
Yeah.
I was like, I was like, there are days that it actually feels like that,
Does. Yeah.
But the upside of it is, I only have myself, to blame,
Mhm.
for the highs and the lows. And you get like if you're a mission-driven person and a values-based person, it gives you a very unique opportunity to pour that into something. And
Mhm.
so, my caution to folks would be don't just join any startup. Like
Mhm.
if that can be exhilarating, but that's not going to last or sustain you.
Mhm.
I was listening, to the managing partner of General Catalyst talk
Mhm.
about what he looks for in businesses to invest in. And, most venture capitalists are looking for 100x returns on what they invest in. But one of the things, if you want entrepreneurs, founders that are going to stick with it, it needs to be something that they feel deep in their bones, at sort of a soul level that they have to do. Like, I have to create this for the world. And, I remind myself every day, not just that that's what I wish I would have had when I was in Iraq, but like,
Mhm.
we want to, make it so that the right suspect gets convicted and that
Mhm.
there aren't wrongful, convictions, right? We want to make it so that the right intelligence gets in the hands of the right decision maker at the right time to prosecute the right
Mhm.
target downrange. We want to make sure that the right information, gets in the hands of the right person to protect our democracy and our values as a country, right? We want to make sure that the right person is held accountable or responsible for
Mhm.
the damage that's done to equipment. We want to make sure that the right person is given access to that high level of information and the wrong person isn't, right? And so these are you know fundamentally critical decisions that are made
Mhm.
every day based on imperfect information collected from
Mhm.
one human from another human, right? And so if we can make that, a more accurate, faster process that can scale, uh,
Mhm.
then I think it could have a really amazing impact in this world.
Mhm.
And so I get up every day and have a whole list of things that I know I need to get done today, and I know I'm not going to get most of them done, but I go after it. But in the back of my head, I'm constantly reminding myself we're trying to illuminate truth. We're trying to
Mhm.
make the world a better place by putting in the hands of people who are making really tough decisions the right information so that they make the right decision.
Mhm. And I love how you kind of bring it back to the mission, what prompted you to
Yeah.
do this. I know, especially in government contracting, so many aspects of it can feel like you're just like wandering in the desert.
Wandering in the desert. Yeah.
Like there's no water, like the heat gets worse and worse, and you're really questioning your own
Yes.
sanity with this process.
Yes. Yes.
No, when we started with our company in government contracting, I mean, I wrote and submitted and lost over 100 proposals. Like, I did not win anything. It was just so demoralizing, Nate. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, and I used to think, I mean, look around at my peers and, went to grad school with me, or like, they're not wandering the desert. They have a
Yeah.
job. Yeah, they're upgrading their
Yeah.
house. They're doing like, and I just had this like, we've got to fix the VA. There's like problems in the VA. This is what we
Yeah.
encountered. But that first contract win was like when we got notification of it, Nate, like I think I just like fell on the floor. I didn't really even say
You didn't
anything.
even
It
have
was
enough
just
energy to do a happy dance, right? There was no happy dance. It was just like,
no. I know, just like collapsed. We
there's
slept for
that
like
cold glass of water in the
17
desert.
hours.
Finally, somebody's putting in your hand.
Yeah.
You're like, wait a second. I'm just gonna
I
sip this and
know.
drink it, and
And
oh,
like in my head, we were gonna like throw a big party. It's like, no, we just like
no.
collapsed. So, and it's something that like, I don't know. I think that was something that surprised me about entrepreneurship. I was someone that was very used to um like routine feedback. Like I'm that new
Yeah.
employee that like wants to sit down, every week with my manager to get the feedback. And with
Tell me what I'm
entrepreneurship,
doing good. Tell me what I'm
yes,
doing
I
good, and I'll do more of
know.
it.
I know.
And what I'm not doing good, I'll obsess about that and I'll do better, right?
Oh yeah, I know. And entrepreneurship was just for me, it was a total different mindset. So it's like, man, it's just going to be out there. I'm going to be, doing this, zero feedback besides like fail, 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 and then
And
eventually a
and
win.
no like specific feedback on how to improve. I mean, it's
Yeah. Oh
soul
no.
crushing,
Yeah.
especially, whether it's customers
Yeah.
actually tend to give better and more
I
detailed
agree.
feedback than investors. I'll just say, if I can rant about investors for a minute,
You can
like
rant.
customers will tell you, I would like it to do this and it doesn't do
Yeah.
that yet, or it did this and that
Mhm.
was not as good as I thought it would be, right? And you get a little bit more. except for when you're like putting it in the black box of the government. Now, I will say,
Uh-huh.
like you were saying, the black box of the government. But at least if you're demoing something
Yeah.
with someone live, it's like, hey, that was good, or that's not what we're really looking for. Okay, what would make it better? Because I can go build that, right?
Yeah.
Within investors, the same guy that helped me get into business school, he was an entrepreneur and he was in VC for a while, and he said that trying to fundraise with investors is like being, an average guy, which I see
Hmm.
myself as an average guy, walking into a bar, trying to find a date, right? And you're talking to someone, and they're constantly looking over your shoulder for someone that's more attractive that's walking in. That's what it feels like constantly.
That's a
Like
good
I'm constantly putting
analogy.
myself out there to someone. This is my life's passion. This is my mission. We are dedicated. Here's the team. Here's the product we've built. Here's what we're going to do. This is how amazing it's going to be. And they're like, nah, can I have any feedback? Nah, and then they just walk off and go talk to somebody else. And you're like, do I need to work out more? Do I like, did I say something stupid? Did I
Uh,
trip over my words? I think I'm a nice guy. I think, like, why don't you want to talk to me? And it constantly feels like this absolute rejection,
mhm.
this absolute constant rejection. So if you're not, if you're not built for constant rejection, which I'm not sure I am yet, I'm like, if you're not built for constant rejection, then maybe entrepreneurship is not for you. Are we selling it? Are we going to get a lot of people to start companies?
I love that day. We must like
Wandering in
pain.
the desert with no water and the heat
No
is
water.
burning up, walking into a bar and trying to get a date or just a number. Like, I just want
Just a
somebody to
number.
be like, yeah, you can call me, can I buy you a drink? No,
No.
constantly. Like, if you're not ready to be told no 1,000 times,
Mhm.
maybe stay in your safe corporate soulless job.
I think that's great advice. I think that's very accurate advice.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying what no one else
I
will
wish
on
would
that.
I wish somebody would have said that to me when I decided to do this journey. I'm like, we're going to build the most amazing thing
Oh
with an
yeah.
awesome mission and values
Mhm.
and everything. And you can't take yourself that seriously either. That's why these
Yeah.
stories help. But like when I step back and I think about it, it makes a ton of sense, right? Like, better than I do how government contracting works. And, I mean, you've learned the hard way, but
Yeah.
like you think it would be just based on, hey, we've got a good product or service. We've, crossed all the T's, dotted all the I's. We've done all the stuff. We're a, veteran-owned small business. We're on the up and up. We can do this. And then you see someone that's won the contract for 20 years win it again, and you're like, huh, now I'm starting to see how this really works, you
Yes,
know?
how it really works.
Or on the venture investment side,
Mhm.
right? They're like, oh yeah, we totally, invest based on the founders and their leadership skills and their mission, and and then you're like, they come to you and they're like, yeah, so tell me, all the customer revenue that you have so far and all your customers and your traction. And I'm like, oh, so it's not really what you say on your website or what you told me. It's basically just that you want to de-risk the heck out of
Yeah.
this and make 100x return for your
Yeah.
LPs,
Mhm.
And so I think the lesson for me too is don't buy the BS, right?
Mhm.
Things are as not as they say they are, but as they are, right?
Mhm.
And so kind of cut through the smoke and mirrors and put yourself in the shoes of those people who are telling you no. And
Mhm.
it's like they're not telling you no because you're not a good leader or a good
Mhm.
person or
Mhm.
someone. They're telling you no because their incentives, are completely different.
Yeah.
You know, so they're probably not, sorry for saying it this way, but they're probably not pissing all over your mission and who you are as an
Sure.
organization because there's something lacking about you, Hannah or Nate, or what we're trying to do. Their incentives are different,
Yeah.
you know? what they're rewarded for is different. And so, don't lose the faith
Mhm.
just because you're getting rejected. Something will break through unexpectedly
Mhm.
if you don't give up.
Mhm. That's a great perspective, Nate.
I
It's
think it's a necessary one, or I would
it
have quit a
really
long
is.
time ago.
I know. I know. I was not prepared for the level of rejection. I'm an achievement-oriented person, so that
Yeah.
really took me by surprise.
Oh, my love language is affirmation, right? Like if you know like the five love languages, and I'm
Yeah.
like, this is the opposite of
It
affirmation.
is
This
the
is just
opposite.
this is abuse,
This is
right?
hell. Yes, I
Frankly, I
know.
feel like I'm in, an emotionally abusive relationship with my customers and my potential investors. Um, and I'm just looking for someone to say that they love me and my product,
Right.
and I haven't found them yet.
That's true.
But we're getting there. We're getting
Okay.
there.
So I know with Prometheus, y'all are on the front lines of
Yeah.
artificial intelligence, and there's a lot of debate about AI. So, is it good or bad?
No,
Yeah,
there's no
just like
debate.
a little bit, just a little bit. I'm hearing chatter.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on AI? What do you think about AI and humans and what it's doing to our world?
Yeah, and I will say this perspective is informed, largely from being in these large talent strategy roles at
Mhm.
Accenture and
Mhm.
and Microsoft. And, you know, I'll start by saying something that may be fairly controversial, which is I think we're mostly all doing it wrong. We're all thinking about AI wrong. There's some people that are thinking about it right, but I think most of us are thinking about it wrong. One thing that's wrong is there shouldn't be any debate as to whether it's good or bad. Just like, is electricity good or bad? Well, you can
Mhm.
electrocute someone or you can power the whole world, right?
Okay.
People do good or bad things with amazing tools and technology, right? The technology itself is not good or bad. You
Mhm.
know, even when you talk about weapon systems, right? A weapon system can protect, a democracy, defend others, keep people from, violating, human rights, or they can be used to violate human rights. And so I think that debate is almost useless in many ways, and
Mhm.
I get sort of, tired of it, right? It's like, hey, humans do good or bad things with it.
Mhm.
I think the debate should be really about, are we using it to its full potential in the right way?
Mhm.
And I think too many people are seeing AI as a tool, just a natural extension of like, we got computers and then they got a little bit better. And then we got the internet and then we got the web browser and e-commerce. And then we got, social and mobile, we got the iPhone, and then, we got cloud and all that stuff. It is not. AI is not just an extension of that tech evolution. It is the next industrial
Mhm.
revolution. And, I think some people get, crap for like overhyping it, but I think we're underhyping it.
Mhm.
And I think we're really underhyping AI because if you think about history, and I'm a student of history, I study
Mhm.
political science and history and all that stuff, and I read a lot of the books I read are boring, nonfiction. My wife always says, "Why don't you read any fun books?" And I'm like, I want to know about like World War II and I want to know about the Industrial Revolution. We went as a human race from doing muscle jobs to mind jobs, muscle jobs to
Mhm.
mind jobs. Now we're doing mind jobs and we're going from mind jobs to meaningful jobs or jobs of meaning.
Mhm.
What got us from muscle to mind was mechanization, right? So you think about almost everyone was farm labor or
Mhm.
factory labor, or we were building things with our muscles.
Mhm.
Well, the combustion engine and electricity made it so that most of us didn't have to use our muscles to do our jobs anymore.
Mhm.
Yes, there's still a lot of manual labor jobs and construction and you know and I and those jobs may be some of the safest jobs, right? A lot of your plumber
Yeah.
and your barber, or hairdresser, The day we allow a robot with scissors near our head, count me out, right? Um, but that was a huge revolution to go from muscle jobs to mind jobs. Now, what AI can do, right, are all the things that I think humans weren't meant to do. And humans can then do the things humans were meant to do. And
Mhm,
so while we're doing mind jobs, so much of the mind jobs are mindless work.
mhm,
We're sending emails, we're in meetings, we're
mhm,
being gatekeepers for data.
mhm,
We're, there's so many, I would say, 60 to 70% of jobs in big corporate America are meaningless jobs.
mhm,
They're totally meaningless jobs. And so when people are all freaked out about like layoffs are such a bad thing, I think they're executed in an inhumane way. But the inhumanity is being in this prison of a meaningless job and of a mindless job in a big company where you're not doing anything of value creation. AI is an unbelievable calculator that speaks every language that every human speaks, which then allows it to, stitch together data and make connections that are impossible for us to do in our own brains.
mhm,
And it's reached that potential. It's driving the cost of cognition, to nothing, just like electricity and the combustible
mhm,
engine drove the cost of, horsepower way down,
mhm,
right? Like you didn't need a ton of people to do it. You could just have this one machine do it. And then we could reorganize the way work was done.
mhm,
AI, like electricity and the combustion engine, is reorganizing knowledge work, can reorganize
mhm.
knowledge. How are we using it wrong? We're sprinkling it out there. We're giving it to people and saying, you go use ChatGPT a little bit to write a better email.
Yeah.
Nate, you go use ChatGPT a little bit to write a better memo. You go use ChatGPT to make a better PowerPoint.
Mhm,
I would suggest we don't need the email or the memo or the PowerPoint. What we need is a world where everyone has access to the information they needed at the point of
mhm,
them doing their job. And the real jobs are building or creating new things. That's what
mhm,
humans are uniquely good at. Like taking information, cross-contextual problem solving or the, combinatory, is it I can't even say the word. Combining things. It's combinatorial
mhm,
effect, I think. Combining things that you wouldn't necessarily combine together to create a new business, new industry,
mhm,
new product, right? We're good at doing that. AI is good at, you know, basically taking large amounts of data that we give it and
mhm,
coming up with unique connections, right? And doing that more efficiently than we can. We're really good at selling things to humans, right? Like relationship selling. We're so building things, selling things. We're really good at solving new problems. So servicing
mhm,
things. So if your job's not building, selling, or servicing something,
mhm,
then AI is probably going to take your job.
mhm,
you know um and the other quote I hear people use a lot is like AI is not going to replace you, people who know how to use it are going to replace you. And I think that's largely true in the sense of, you know if you understand its full potential and you can augment yourself
mhm,
with its full potential, then you're in a much better position than those that are resisting it, right? And so, I don't think it should be a debate as to whether or not it's
mhm,
good or bad. I don't think it should be a debate as to whether or not it's going to have, revolutionary potential.
mhm,
If you're seeing it, clear-eyed, it's got as much potential as electricity and the combustion engine had,
mhm,
to change the way we work. And so what do you do about it as an individual? Learn as much as you can, but use it,
mhm,
right? There are so many, I laughed about this, but it's kind of sad. There were so many senior people in companies that are responsible for building, the next generation of AI software who aren't using it
yeah,
and not using it to its full potential.
yeah,
And so, part of the problem is I think there's a lot of people talking about it that don't really
mhm,
understand it.
Mhm.
And I think we would all benefit. You're less afraid of something the more you know about it.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of the fear and uncertainty comes from a lack of exposure. Back to the exposure,
Mhm.
lack of exposure, lack of knowledge, lack of experience with it. And so I think we all ought to close the gap and really embrace it and try to figure out how to use it to our advantage versus being like, I'm just going to spend all my time debating whether or not this is a
Mhm.
good thing.
Mhm. Yeah, that's one of the best descriptions, Nate, I've heard on AI. I've been talking to folks about this for a while. I love the muscle to mind to now meaning. That's a
Yeah.
really interesting way to frame it. And just kind of as you were talking, I was thinking just kind of a few conversations I've had with folks with AI, and a lot of the fear is very palpable.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder, just kind of as you're describing it, I'm thinking back and I was like, that's kind of the driving influence then. Like their whole perspective is this very based in fear.
Yeah. If you do things out of a place of fear,
Yeah.
right, you will freeze or flight
Yeah. Yeah.
or you will run toward fire, right?
I,
And I'm not trying to just, I'm not trying to promote the book again. It's on Amazon. What I'm trying to say is with everything in life, if you take AI and you say, it's going to destroy us, it's going to become
Mhm.
Skynet, it's going to,
Mhm.
and then you don't seek to understand it,
Mhm.
then you're part of the problem.
Yeah.
And I have very little patience for people who are worried about it taking their job or jobs who aren't learning how to use it and integrate
Mhm.
it into their job. I
Mhm.
have very little patience for that, right? If you're sitting there saying, and I'm empathetic to this
Yeah.
transition period because it is creative destruction, right?
Right.
There were lots of people who were, pushing a plow on a farm,
Mhm.
lots of people who were doing manual labor in factories that lost those jobs
Mhm.
because of engines, because of electricity,
Mhm.
because of robotics and automation, right? But in the longer run, the people that are working on those things have much higher skilled jobs, much higher
Mhm.
wage jobs, less dangerous jobs,
Mhm.
right? And so there is this transition period that that we all have to stare at with clear eyes. But what are you doing to transition yourself? What are you
Mhm.
doing, to keep up with this evolution? And it's not about education and where you went to school. It's about continuous learning.
Mhm.
And there's so much out there that's available to you. There's LinkedIn learning programs and there's certificate programs and I mean, I even went back and did one. I went back and did an AI, strategy course
Yeah.
with a professor that, leads the digital and initiative at Harvard. And it was mind blowing, right? Because
Mhm.
he exposed us to, companies in China and other places in the world, that are doing phenomenal stuff with AI because they're fully embracing it. And what
Mhm.
I'm worried about is are we going to get in our own way, especially in
Mhm.
America, in a way that leads to us falling behind,
Mhm.
not just economically or technologically, but falling behind for our people, right?
Mhm.
Do we become a place where it impacts the livelihoods and the quality of life people have because we're slow to embrace it.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, well, you give us a lot of hope that, we may be shedding some meaningless jobs, but
Yeah.
can use AI to kind of amplify or really optimize, some very meaningful things in work. And I think that concept of meaning is something that folks don't often think about in
Yeah.
terms of their work. It's just like, okay, what do I get from this? Or like, what does this say about me? The title or the comp
Yeah.
or and it's interesting to kind of frame it up and kind of under the umbrella of meaning. That puts a new spin on it. I appreciate that. So, Nate, any final pieces of advice or parting thoughts that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, I think the one thing I would want everyone, to know, is that you're not alone. And there's sort of this myth of, the, rugged individualist, is the hero of their own story and that there was no one else, right? I wouldn't have had the success that I've had or, been able to do the things that I've been able to do if it wasn't for the people that helped me along the way. And now I try to, with just about anybody who reaches out to me, that is willing to put in the work, right? That's my one caveat, right? Like, don't just reach out and be like, okay, I would like a handout, or I'd like, you know, I'll give you a hand up, but I won't give you a
Yeah.
handout. And I think that is the biggest message I'd want to get out to people because in the depths of my own depression or in the low places that I've been, in my 48 years of life or even in the last year of trying to be an entrepreneur, calling my co-founder, calling my best friend, talking to my wife, talking to my therapist, talking to you here on this podcast, right? You you learn that you're not the only one that has had these experiences. You're not the only one that has made it out on the other side of them. And that should give us all hope in
Mhm.
humanity that there are helpers and there are people who have experienced this before you who can provide some wisdom or thoughts or just some basic encouragement about keep going. You know, don't stop, keep going. You're not alone.
Well, thank you so much, Nate, for coming on here today
Yeah.
and sharing your insights and your experiences. And I know your contributions to our nation have impacted so many, and appreciate you taking time to chat with me.
Well, the pleasure and honor has been mine, Hannah. Thank you for having me on. I hope we get this to more people than just, my mom and and a few people in my network. But just like the book, if we help one other person and they go on to help others, like the impact of what we do is immeasurable.
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to this episode of Tipping Spears with Hannah Becker. We hope this conversation has sparked new ideas and challenged the way you think. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, and we'll catch you next time with another exciting guest.